Watch! All right, we are live. Welcome back to your viewers and fellow watchmen. We got an awesome show tonight. We got Greg,
Hello,
the Chubby Funster, and Gary. I'm excited.
Yes, sir. I am excited, man. I was excited. Usually you don't ask me until Thursday, maybe Wednesday. What's the topic for the show?
Yeah.
But you asked me on Sunday.
Yeah, I did.
What's the show title? It's Sunday.
Yeah. Well, I kind of knew what the answer was going to be because
Yeah, it's going to be called Chubby because he was on anyway. Let me explain. Matt has a game in the morning. He cannot have a drink. I'll be drinking for 2 tonight. Buckle up. How was your week, Matt? You getting your gaming done?
Yeah, actually quite a bit. And your West Marches thing got started, and that was a lot of fun. Can't talk about it though because our guys aren't back to the home base yet.
That being said, if the Discord link has been put up yet, everyone is welcome to click the Discord link, join the channel, go to Gary's game table, go to read this first.
Yeah, please. Yeah, people haven't been reading first, but yeah.
No. You know what I want to do is I want to get a guest on who's run a West Marches campaign before, and I just want to talk to him. You know, almost like a mentor program, a big brother, big sister program.
I might be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have some names. We can talk after the show, but He's waiting long enough.
Chubby's waiting. Let's get to him. What's up, Bolter?
Hey, guys.
And there he is.
Hey, Chubby. How you doing?
I'm ready for some adventure.
Well, this is the second watch. This is where we kind of... No, I'm just kidding.
We're winding down from adventure.
Someone asked me why the second watch, and I'm like, in all my years of gaming, whenever a random encounter occurs at night, it's always the third watch. So I picked the second watch, so we're safe. But
there's a breakfast place near me called First Watch. I don't know how widespread it is. I'm in Atlanta.
We have one in Austin or down the road from me.
Great breakfast place. Yeah.
Is it good? Because I just want to drive past that place with a water gun on Sunday mornings when everybody's lined up.
The clientele is probably a little special extra. Yeah. I don't want to go into deep on anybody, but it's hoity-toity would be the word I would use.
Oh, I was gonna say, so it's no Waffle House.
Oh no, it's no Waffle House.
No. All right, we got our first super chat of the night, Disco Barbarian. Thank you, sir. Yard Dog brothers and Sword sisters, happy Friday. Time for second watch. Oil your gear and sharpen your blades, and keep an eye on those ruins over yonder. Indeed, sir. Indeed. I love the enthusiasm. Actually,
thanks, Disco.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, you know how we do things. We're kind of like pretty informal, let things be organic, but we definitely want you to shill your stuff because what we kind of were talking a little bit before the stream started. Dude, you came out of nowhere with the Shadowdark, and I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about that. We can talk about that as long as you want. Sure. Whatever you'd like to talk, but I know you've published something previously. Was it Ambition and Avarice?
Ambition and Avarice, yeah.
That was back in 2013. Before we get into Shadowdark, yeah. What was well, talk to us a little bit about that. Like, what was your desire? What was motivation for that?
Well, I wrote 7 free games before I wrote Ambition and Avarice, and I wrote them with the promise that I would not make it have any price so I could get art for free. So I got a lot of art, and so even after, if some of them were successful, even after that, I couldn't really convert them over into a paid product because I had already made the deal about the art. So Ambition and Avarice was the first product that I put together that was, using for profit, using stock art, doing that kind of the what you'd see from me today, that model. And I just continuously kept rolling all the profits from stuff that I would do back into stock art. So I have a huge stock art repository now from DrivethRu, and I could write anything I want. The only thing is how obscure the art. Sci-fi art is harder to get. It's been a stretch with some of the vampire stuff that is in my next project, but I'm still full up on art. I could probably write another 50 pages and have enough art for it.
So wait a second. You start by looking for the art. Is that how?
I'm saying, so I build up the repository. So then if I decide to go with a particular project,
okay.
I don't have anything holding me back in terms of expenses, right?
Gotcha.
So like I come from an economics background, so I just describe it as vertical integration. I control everything. I have layout skills that I have from my job. I do everything in InDesign and Photoshop. I make my own maps. I have the stock art already purchased. So when I make a product, like this product is going to be my first Kickstarter, this vampire game called Shadow City Blood and Neon. And I've already put in about $600 in terms of buying some art that I needed of specific things, but that's it. So going in, I don't need to raise a certain amount of money in order to cover the costs of artwork that has to be paid. None of that. Everything is already paid for. That's why I haven't used Kickstarter yet. I don't have any need to. I can just finish a book and put it on DrivethruRPG and I'm done. That's been the secret to rolling out a lot of products really quickly. Also,
I did not know that. That's impressive. Real quick, we got a Rumble rant. I actually caught it this time from Ultra, $1. Thank you so much, man. Sorting through my TTRPG containers and got a special one for all my Shadowdark books, including Shadow Sun and Shadow Rim. Looking forward to getting Invictus.
Ultra, awesome. Ultra's been a long-time fan, so much appreciated.
Took part in the first session of my West Marches campaign this week.
Oh, right.
And they took care of business. Let me tell you, man. No nonsense.
Yep.
Here's our marching order. Let's go. It was great. Anyway, sorry. So I was telling you earlier, and Matt was talking about how it seems like you came from out of nowhere. And I remember when Shadowdark came out, everybody was talking about how great it was going to be to create for this. And then Kelsey put out, I don't know what she calls it. I guess her OGL or
basically it was for about a week. It was the only thing holding up the publication of Shadow Sun was that it hadn't dropped yet. And I was like, I was sending her stuff on Discord and being like, "Are you okay with this? Because I haven't, And she was like, "It's almost ready." And then as soon as I had that license, poof, done. Yeah.
So it. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons, and we can talk about it in a minute, to game-wise why you would want to develop for Shadowdark. How easy is it to publish?
It's incredibly, incredibly easy. You could probably say the same thing about OSE and some of the other, Labyrinth, some of the other OSR chassis, because the amount of mechanical fiddly bits is small. But with Shadowdark, it's so streamlined and very simple to just attach whatever. And because you don't have to do, writing something for a Pathfinder or 4th edition, 5th edition D&D chassis, it's so many powers and abilities, and they have to be balanced against this and that. And Shadowdark, you can just write a short description, put the stat block together, give the thing a couple of powers, you're done. I mean, the description of, I think a hobgoblin, for instance, is one sentence description of the creature, a stat block, and an ability of if there's an ally standing next to them, they get a +1 to attack or damage. I think that's what it is. That's it. That's a hobgoblin. So you can just multiply that out into whatever you need. You can write infinite monsters in a very, very short period of time, and it's so easy. It's incredibly fast.
I want
Did
to
you?
take
Oh, go ahead.
want to take 1 second just to recognize that Brian is in chat. He's on the show about every other-ish week, I'd say. Nobody is a bigger Shadowdark proponent than DM Cloaker. He loves this game so much, so I'm sure he'll be hanging on to your every word. Thanks for being here,
I've talked
Brian.
with Ryan. Yeah.
You have. So what was your latest one? How many do you have on the bestseller at DrivethRu right now? I know you have
At
one
any
at
given
least.
time, it changes because of sales fluctuations or whatever, and other people drop stuff. So like when somebody drops a new product, they shoot up to, you know, second or third for a little while and they go.
Right.
But in general, I have about 5 of the top 15.
Wow,
So
that's fantastic.
like the top 10 has the highest volatility, but there's something I don't know what the math is, but like the 11 to 15 range, I'll have a product do really good and then it'll slide down into that range, but then it won't generally drop lower than 50. So it just kind of keeps circulating there. And then like when Kelsey did her big Kickstarter for Western Reaches, I didn't do any marketing for it. Like a bunch of things shot up to the front just because of that Kickstarter effect.
Yeah.
And yeah, I watch it sometimes. I try not to get too, you can check things every day and go crazy tracking your sales with stuff. I try to only check it every couple of days, but yeah, it's really interesting to me how all of a sudden I'll sell, 25 copies of Shadowrem in a like couple day time frame, and I'm like, I didn't say it to anybody anywhere. Like I haven't been done it. So there must be a lot of things going on outside of my.
I will tell you one thing worth mentioning is that I try to catch a lot of Kelsey's whenever she does a live cast.
Yep.
It always seems to coincide when I'm sitting in the car line to pick the kids up from school.
Oh wow.
So I get to see a lot of them. And I mean, I've heard her speak of you in particular, Chubby Funster, very positively on several occasions.
That's great to hear. I
think
usually don't catch her live, but I think it's just scheduled. Like our schedules are not.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like she has a soliloquy or anything about it, but you enter the room, it's like, oh, it's Chubby. I mean, you see it. So I think she's been really, really kind to your work in particular. And she seems not just open to people using her game to create, but she seems genuinely excited about it. When somebody does something good, she's going to let people know. And that's, where else are you going to get that?
She's got skill. She's got that 18 charisma. Indeed. And I think that's a huge part of the butthurt that people have about Shadowdark is that they don't. And they don't. They wish that they had that 10% XP bonus. They wish that they were bringing in a larger number of retainers, and they just don't have them. And they're upset, and they're like, "Why does this paladin have a better charisma than me? It sucks." Tough. Yeah. Sorry, that's life.
I think that's
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like she's got social skills. I've used this example before. I think it expresses everything I have to say on the subject. When we get together with other couples, my wife will ask, like, how did you guys meet to the other couple? I will never, ever, 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 ever ask that question. It never occurs to me. It doesn't process. My brain doesn't. I never even think about it. Even knowing that she will do it, I still in the moment will not think of enough to do it. There's just certain things that she does that I don't understand how they work. The same with Kelsey has a way of talking to people, a way of being so humble and friendly and open that I mean, I try my best, but I cannot compete with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think we live in I'm old now. I'm days away from 51 and I'm feeling it. I really am, man. I'm going through it. Let me tell you. And I think that it takes effort to be
Yeah.
nice. You have to want to be nice. You have to want to be positive, and then you have to. It
You
takes
also have to
work.
not be negative.
You know,
That's a big thing too. Yeah.
well, and that's the whole thing. If you just tell yourself, I'm going to say good things, or it's not the hardest thing in the world to do, but you have to be active in that. You have to make this
Yeah.
decision to be that kind of person.
No, because
Sorry, go ahead,
you're
Matt.
not wrong. And Greg, you've been in the industry a hell of a lot longer than me. I mean, I only got into the OSR 5 years ago or so. But I just sort of see a lot of, we'll just broadly refer to it as the negativity in the industry. Seem to like have its origins the G plus days, right? Where beefs were formed, and you have this like really small, tight market, and everyone's just fighting for a crumbs piece of the pie, coupled with the fact that you got DrivethruRPG, which has almost a monopoly on this space. I think it's really hard for a lot of people to sort of shed that. I don't want to call it a business model, but maybe it was, right. You got known because you were loud and edgy, and you pick fights, and you do all this stuff, and then people would buy your stuff. They'd go to your YouTube channel, whatever. And she's really redefined how we should be going forward. And I sort of feel like it's hit in this right weird zeitgeist moment culturally, where I think a lot of people are just done with the infighting, and they just want to like get back to doing whatever it is, that whether it's football, playing elf games,
man. I want to.
So
I want to roll some dice with some friends and not worry
but
about
like,
what's on the news.
but like
I don't care.
from your perspective, I mean, do you get the same sense that like that's just the way things were done, and
Well,
now
there's definitely. I don't want to get into the weeds on this topic, but when the whole thing came out, where there were the leaked private messages around the people who tried to frame up Zach
yes,
Sabbath, right? The reason I bring that up is there was a point where one of them was saying, like in one of the messages, like that there's only a certain amount of air in the hobby, and they have to take up as much as possible for their thing, and in order to do that, they need to smush other people. Like that was how they justified it to themselves.
I remember that.
And I felt like that was actually really great truth telling in that moment. Like that's how they really feel. That's not true, but that's how they feel. And so if you do feel that way, then you'll go around and stomp on people. But there's so much. People say there's not a lot of money in RPG. There's a ton of money in RPGs. There really is, compared to a lot of other things. It's not zero sum. If somebody can come along and put some great product on the table and really get people to open up their wallet for it and expand it, that's great. Whenever I see somebody talking about writing something, I try to reply, that's what you should do. Write it right now. Do it right now.
Yeah.
I harassed my friend Joe the lawyer for a long time, because he had run a game for a campaign he called Blood Island, and he had all this stuff, and he never posted. He did it back in the Flail Snails days on G+. And I was like, you got to write this. You got to publish this out. This is great. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And I was like, look, if you die, if you get, not like old age, like if you get hit by a car, like everything that you came up with is gone. Poof, gone like a fart in the wind. And if you would just write it down, even if you think, oh, it sucks the way I wrote it, somebody else might pick it up and refine it and run in a different direction. Like it'll live. But if you don't do anything, it's gone. It's over. I got off grids. I agree. Off grids, probably right. That might be the source of a lot of these things.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you. But yeah, I think that's something, well, I know that's what Kelsey was doing for years before Shadowdark came out. And I think a lot of, I'm not going to name names, a lot of the sour grapes, they don't do that. And it, it shows. Well, you seem awfully optimistic about the industry. in terms
yeah,
of what's
definitely.
out there. So do you think there's room for not just Shadowdark, but some of the mainstays out there? Do you think that would dare I say, are we entering into a golden age now that WotC seems to be floundering? What are your thoughts on all
Well,
that?
I'm a big history person, and I see Wizards of the Coast in a position similar to, and maybe Paizo could be Austria, but Wizards of the Coast is in a similar position to the Ottoman Empire at the beginning of World War I. They're the old man of Europe. They're weak. They can't defend their territory. They're vulnerable to predation by other powers on all sorts of different flanks. That's where they are. They cannot defend themselves. They're just incapable of it. They don't even know what they're doing. So all you have to do is be good, and you can take as much territory from Wizards of the Coast as you want. That's all it is. And yeah, Paizo could be the Austro-Hungarian Empire, man. They same situation. Their own people hate them in their own company. These people inside these companies hate them and don't want them to succeed. So just grab some fucking territory, man. Just grab it.
And that might be sort of inoculating. Shadowdark is sort of self-inoculating against this because it is a singularity vision. It's a company, presumably owned by
That's right.
one person. There's like 3 or 4
people. That goes to my vertical integration
so
point.
All that,
this was a big point for authors, and it was all the way going back into the G+ days that the authors were talking about stuff that we're starting to see now, where it became more profitable for them to sell fewer books at a better percentage than to sell a ton of books at a low percentage, because they're giving all the money to the book publisher, right? So why would you give Random House all the money when you could sell half as many books and keep 4 times the cut that you would be getting from Random House? So that's the thing. If you make it yourself, your cut will be massive. So do that. Don't write for Wizards of the Coast. That's a loser game.
I think it's funny because I played music for a while for money. That's how I paid the rent for a while. And I see so many similarities between the music business and gaming now. But I think the problem is that the creators don't really understand that it's a business yet, right? They're all still artists and they're expressing themselves, whatever the fuck, right? And there's a way to do that. You need to stay positive and you have to make friends. And you're never gonna see a band, unless they're rich or something, you're never gonna see a struggling band or just a working band ever say anything bad about another band.
They don't want to burn bridges.
It's just never gonna happen. Yeah. You never want to burn that bridge, right? You're gonna be as nice as you can all the time. Everybody's your friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just this thing. And I think that we're sort of in this punk rock phase of indie creators for games. And I think they need to, maybe, as much as you might hate all those hippies, look at like the business models of the Grateful Dead or Fish or those guys who, just like you, they keep everything in house. They do it all themselves. They don't have a big organization. They don't deal with Ticketmaster. And I think that's kind of what Kelsey did with gaming. She's got 2 people she works with. There's not going to be any fighting. She doesn't have to pay a big staff. You're not having to share your money with anybody but Drive-Thru, So, I mean, it's such a good situation for everybody. And I can't, other than, what is it? I guess there's a few other games, but I guess Shadowdark would be really the flag.
Well, there's a lot. Castles and Crusades is doing very well. DCC is doing very well.
I love OSC. That's always doing great, it seems like.
There's a hunger for it out there. Free League is doing great as being a professional level company. They're the most WotC-like of anybody I've talked about so far. Yeah, and they're doing great. Alien's fantastic. It's one of my favorite games I've ever played.
That is a great game.
What are you playing other than Shadowdark? What other games do you play?
It's a long list. So in my Saturday night group, we just came off of a very long Adventure Conquer King 2 campaign. Then we had a Shadowdark campaign, and now I'm test running my vampire game in there. But in just that group over the past, let's say, 3 or 4 years, we've played Alien, Traveler. Let's see what else. Yeah, I'm not. There's some that I didn't play with them. I played in. Rob Connolly has his Majestic Wilderlands. I played in a group with him for a while. Joe the Lawyer ran second edition D&D. I really like second edition D&D, even with the Thaco math and all that stuff. With the modern VTT, the character sheet does all the Thaco calculations. You don't have to do anything anymore. It's just a complicated character sheet, but it's crazy. I've been playing. Let's see. Man, you caught me on my. I'll get back to you. Keep going. Let me just open up my little digital library here.
No, that's fine. I was just curious. It's always interesting to see what
the One Ring.
I think
Walking
we all
Dead. Let's see. I played Boot Hill a couple years ago, and I'm looking forward to playing a lot of stuff at North Texas. I'm in 7.
Yeah, we'll be there.
We're gonna be there.
7 totally different games: Vampire, Shadowdark. I'm in Greg Gillespie's games, the Dragon Slayer, I think. Hyperborea, Gangbusters. We played Gangbusters in my my Saturday night group. Just tons of stuff. I try to, if you want to really excel, even just as an individual not making anything, play as many games as you can, because it will, at the very least, it will tell you what you don't like. You play Fate and you're like, I really don't like how the narrative control works, where the players can add things to the world in a way that changes what the GM's vision is. So I'm not going to play games like that. I went through a long period of time where I played a lot of games that I decided I'm never going to play these again. But you have to play Apocalypse World. You have to play Vampire. You have to play, Pendragon. You got to play whatever you can play, so you can learn something new. If you just play second edition D&D all the way from cradle to grave, then you're not going to get anything anywhere near the experience you could have if you stepped outside of that.
I agree with that. Actually, some people like making the argument that it's better to master one rule set than than use a plethora of rule sets. But I think each author and designer's approach to particular situations that are common from one game to the next is enlightening to see how they handle it, right? And it's not like you can go to school and learn how to write OSR. Like it's always been a do-it-yourself kind of thing, and you need to expose yourself. It's one of the reasons why when I first got into the OSR, I was like, oh, so-and-so's got a Kickstarter. All right, I'll back it. And I'll go pick this up. I'll go pick that up, and I'll just pick up as much as I could. And I was reading a lot. I've kind of slowed down a little bit just because my wife is concerned about the size of my bookshelf. I need to buy another one. But I wanted to go back to Shadowdark. So, we've talked about
DM Cloaker dropped a super chat.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, he did. What's up, Brian?
It didn't pop up on the thing. That's weird. Okay. Oh, there it is.
It's in the YouTube.
All right. What RPG work first inspired you to write adventure settings, and what do you see in Kelsey's creative philosophy that you use as a North Star to make it all feel like a shared creator space? That is definitely a Brian question, if ever.
Well,
I'm glad you said it.
The thing that inspired me to start writing RPGs isn't actually an RPG. It's Jason Bourne. I love the hell out of Jason Bourne. And I wanted an RPG that would create that feeling, like that, like you're fighting in a 1 second frame, bam, 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 the guy goes down, right? Like you're throwing the guy over your shoulder and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote. It was terribly written, but the first role playing game that I wrote was trying to recapture that. I called it Synapse because it was like snap, just moments of time that you're having these fights. But I've been inspired by a lot of Kelsey's Cursed Scrolls. When I first got those were like, I actually sent her a Discord message. I said, man, I'm going to have to step up my game. Like, this is incredible. Like, she really brought real serious innovation.
She did. She
amazing.
That zine is a model. It is a. I mean, don't copy her work, but copy the format. There's no wasted space. It's
what I like
so good.
What I like too, and something I've noticed, and what I've discovered I prefer to purchase in the indie scene is, adventures tend to be one and done. Unless it's like a classic adventure, where like you could play it a couple of times. I'll throw out Tower of the Stargazer by James Raggi. That's like
I've read it. I've never played it.
Oh, it's so much fun to play, dude. And then of course also by James Raggi is Death Frost Doom. Those have to be on everyone's shelves. But
there's actually a Death Frost Doom homage in Shadowrim.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's a Draugr site that is far off the beaten path. Like it is you have to really push to get out that far out on the map. It's on the edge of the map, and there's like a stone door that's blocked, and there's nothing. There's no monsters. There's nothing. And if the players go and get tools and work and open the stone door, there's 500 zombies on the other side of the door. And I put in there, I said, there's, even if they run away, like these zombies will then flood out into the terrain. Like they will cover everything and cause huge problems in the game world. So
James Raggi has something I call the player psychological method of game design. He just knows players are going to press that big red button, and he knows how to get them to do it. I freaking love it. But I want to,
always push it. Someone always
sometimes it's me because I know it's there.
Well, I knew nobody could find a door with no monsters around and be like, well, we'll just not open this door.
right. Exactly. We have to open it. It's there, right? But going back to the zine thing, and I get your thoughts on this. So, like, the adventures tend to be one and done. But what I like what she's done, and what it looks like you've been moving in that direction with some of the stuff you've put out too, is that it's not just an adventure. There's some tools in there that you can use in other things. So it's like you have like a new character class, some new spells, or a new race.
Well, you get with every one, you get a hex map, you get a new character class, you get everything that when you used to buy those big splat books, remember the big hardcover AD&Ds, they were full of stuff that you didn't need. What you wanted was this character class and that character class. And I feel like Cursed Scroll gives you a splat book in about, what is it?
30 to 40
pages.
We had a time where there was a couple sessions where somebody was going to be out and we were going to be low on characters. And I ran the Cursed Scroll 3, the Viking one. And it was awesome. I said, one of you can be a seer and everybody else has to be a sea wolf. And I'm like, you come up on a ship. I gave them some companions that all got massacred in the first battle, right?
Nice.
And they were attacking a monastery, and I spent like 20 minutes. I got a surface map and like a subterranean map. I put it together and I said, this is what, this is what they find. Boom. It was the easiest thing to run. It was so fun. And they were really surprised at how fast it was, because I ran it as this is one of the things that people are talking out their ass about. So what happens is they'll play a game and they won't play it according to the rules of the game, and then they'll be like, it didn't work out great. Right. Well, it's like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. So Kelsey's rules are you run always on initiative. And people are like, well, I'm not going to do that because I know better than doing that. That's for kiddies. Okay. Well, if you run it on always on initiative, then if some player says, I'm going to go head over this way, now they're all by themselves. And if somebody walks through the door, they're going to have to run away, And so it really creates, so we only have a limited amount of time. If you go 2 or 3 movements over in this other direction, now we have to wait for you to come back. So the players are telling each other to stay together. And then if they do get separated, they pay a heavy, you walk into a room and there's you and 4 orcs and all your friends are 3 movement cycles away. Like, you're screwed, So it play the game the way people write the game. The writer didn't just arbitrarily go, oh, I think you should have it this way. They made that decision for a reason. Play it that way. If you play it that way and you don't like it, then hey, that's cool, no problem. But don't play it like Alexander McCrease talks about how he would make a class where there were benefits and drawbacks, and then people would play the class without the drawbacks and go, oh, this class is overpowered. He's like, yes, it would be overpowered if you don't use the drawbacks. Yeah. Like, I don't know why people even complain about that. Like, you made your own problem. What are you talking about?
Well, I think that's part of the culture. It's part of the over the past however many years, this idea of just, well, if you don't like it, change it. Rule the cool, man. And to the point where I think a lot of people, until a few years back, I don't think a lot of people played rules as written, period. I think people walked into games with their own rules that they were going to
I think the internet has led to more homogeneity of rules, whatever, than ever before, because people didn't even know what other people were doing, and they were just like, well, this makes sense to me, I'm going to run it like this. Right. And now you actually have people posting live plays and think, this is how I run it. The only live play I'm tempted to even attempt is Alien, because I think the way I run it has a special value, and I'd want to share that with people. But it's a big endeavor, and I've got a lot on my plate right now, so I'm not jumping at the bit. I did get asked by several of my friends to run a few sessions of Terra Invictus as a live play to show how it works. I'm interested in that from a marketing promotion sense, but I don't feel like I'm going to be up there showing unique GM skills. But in Alien, like, I have a really unique way of running it that I think is really good, and I have these timed beats of things happening in the so that there's never a moment where the players have they're always totally pressed up against the wall, just like in a game of Shadowdark when you're in a very tight combat and you've got 4 hit points. Like that, your every decision matters when you're in that situation, and if you've got plenty of time to put on your plate armor and your 15 magic items and cast 5 or 6 cleric spells on you before you even go into battle, then there's no fear. But if I pull a knife on you in real life within 10 feet, like, shit's got ripped, it's like it doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter. That is a real situation. So
we got a rumble rant from Ultra, $1. Thanks, man. I'm usually okay with rule of cool as long as the players read the effing manual.
Yeah, and I break rules sometimes. You know, like if a player says, I want to do this really cool thing, and I'm like, I don't think that that's how it would work, but I think it would be cool, so I'm going to let it ride. But I think if you let that go too much, it become the rules exist so that everybody has the same framework. You know,
Yeah.
the analogy of
Right.
we're playing when someone asks me what role playing games are, I'm like, it's like when you're playing with a kid and they go pew pew, I shot you, and you go, oh no, you missed. And I'm like, all we're doing is rolling dice to determine if they did shoot you with their
Right.
laser gun. That's
Yeah.
all it is.
Yeah, I tend
Easy.
to look at that whole debate in like three levels. Like you started a game raw, and then as you kind of like learn the table and the table's idiosyncrasies sort of manifest themselves, maybe you start house ruling a few things to keep everyone happy and engaged. And then homebrew is when the GM gets to have fun and add something to the game to like kind of create, to like facilitate world building,
Yeah.
which brings me to what you've been doing with Shadowdark. What is it about Shadowdark to you, from your perspective, that I guess has facilitated like these worlds that you've been like working with, like making an analog for Dark Sun, an analog for Skyrim? Terra Invictus, was that, correct me if I'm wrong, was that something you did
That's my
previously?
personal creation. Yeah, I had written it. It was originally written for Ambition Avarice 2, and I had started converting it. I thought it was just going to be a simple conversion. I mean, I had everything written. I thought I had everything I needed, and then in that Ambition Avarice design, I had created these icons for different types of information. So there's an icon for NPCs, there's an icon for weather, there's an icon for whatever. It was just organizing information. And when I started bringing it into Shadowdark, I realized that it could be used as a resolution stack for solo play. First you read you do the weather, then you do a first look, then I could say, if you keep going in the hex, you run into a monster, then you run into an NPC, then you run into this. And then I started organizing it that way. And then I was like, oh man, I could come up with all kinds. So then I just kept building and building and building into this. So there's way more content in the Shadowdark version than I had in the Ambition Avarice version, because I saw all of these opportunities to build new things in there. So you can run it like a lone wolf book, even with a solo party. And you could just go into a hex and you can say, I'm gonna stay in this hex for another hour. And then you look at the next icon, you resolve that icon, then you go, okay, I'm gonna stay in this hex for another, or you can leave. Right. And Shadowdark has a great danger levels system. So you can just decide, like, I'm gonna get another random encounter if I hang out here for another hour. So I'm gonna get the hell out of here. Right. And that it's a great, it just perfectly fit. I'd never played solo RPGs in my life, and I was like, but this is perfect.
I've never.
And when I wrote it, my son is 14, and I showed him how it worked, and he was like, I'll take this print proof copy you've got here, Dad. And then I started finding him up at 1 a.m. running Shadowdark characters through this thing. He was just obsessed with it. He played it for like 2 weeks, and to me, I was like, okay, then that's it. It works. This is a viable thing.
Yeah.
And so the Terra Invictus is one, maybe a fourth, probably more like a fifth of a continent that I had made on a world map, and I have talked about, I'd love to expand it if it can be more successful. It takes a lot longer for a setting with there's two different kinds of settings. There's a setting like Shadow Sun or Shadow Rim where I'm providing you with a broad canvas, and then there's like really specific, here's what's here, here's what's there.
Right.
And it takes longer for a setting like that to gain steam, because people are interested in general settings more than they're interested in. The more specific something is, the less widely it's useful to people. Yep. So I'm just waiting. I'm hoping that it will continue. It's already silver. It's moving towards Electrum. It's doing well. I don't want to put a whole bunch of energy into it and then have it not be people didn't really like what I did, so now I've got a second thing that people don't really like.
Right.
Good.
Right.
But to go back to your question, that I think what I saw, and this is how a lot of things are in life. Like it's what's that saying? Opportunity looks like work dressed up like work, or something like that. So people, they see opportunity and they go, I don't know if I really want to put all the energy into taking advantage of that opportunity. And then they go, oh man, I could have been the blah blah blah. Yeah, but you didn't. Like you have to do the work if you want to be that successful. So I saw who Eric Tenkar is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I'm friends with him for a long time, about as long as I've been in role-playing games, pretty much, and online role-playing games. I didn't know Eric as a child, but but he had a podcast where we're just groups of guys talking about stuff, and this Shadowdark had come out. We looked at the quick start rules, and we were like, let's just run a session of it on one weekend. We ran it once, and we were like, wow, this really works good. This is great. And I said, I saw that the Kickstarter was really taking off. I don't know how much I realized it was a product of WotC having totally stepped on their dick so hard that everybody was ready to hand their money to somebody else, but that was a big factor. And then there's a whole bunch of factors into why she was successful, but I could see that it was really taking off. I said, this is an opportunity to do some things that I'd wanted to do for a while, ideas, and I was like, I'm just going to put these together. Wizards of the Coast will never, please don't, now that I think about it, ever bring back Dark Sun.
No.
If they do, it will be totally to destroy Dark Sun, in the same way that they've destroyed all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
I'd rather they just forget Dark Sun ever existed.
Yeah.
And and so I said, here's the opportunity. Let's take settings that the IP holder is not willing to treat well. Like no shade on Bethesda, but they're not interested in getting into Skyrim as an RPG product, really. So I said, they've licensed out some stuff to, I forget what the company is, but it's basically a miniatures game. It's not a role-playing game in the way that we would want to do it, especially not in the way I would want to play it. And so I'm like, let's just take these settings and write enough difference in there that it's not infringing on their IP. And then if people want to play Dark Sun, just let them play it with something else. Let's keep it moving. I don't want Dark any more than I want Joe the Lawyer's Blood Island to sit on a shelf somewhere and never get written. Like, if people want to play it, let's play it. Let's get it out. Don't leave it as abandonware for nobody to get to play. That's what I'm like. Let's make a thing. Let's get people doing it. And if they want to play, let them play. I don't know why any company would screw over their own products in the way that Wizards of the Coast does. It's just not rational.
Yeah. Well, I love your answer. And I love that attitude, man, because Dark Sun is like one of my favorite settings from the 2nd edition era. And it is a damn shame, because I remember picking up the 4th edition book, and 4th edition mechanics aside, I just remember being like, ugh, because they took out a lot of the stuff that made Dark Sun so cool and gritty.
Right.
I think there was one thing I liked about it, and that was sort of like the cosmology. But that's just like window dressing. It's, so I think that's great. That's great. Like, if I tell this to everybody, pray that I win big in the lottery, because I will walk into WotC, slap down whatever they want, $1 billion. Yes. I'll take Dark Sun, and I will I'll rescue it from WotC, because that is a great system, and I think, or setting, and I love the fact that Shadow Sun introduces Dark Sun to like this new crop of players. And to your point about Kelsey's success, I certainly agree that there was like this timing issue, but the fact that her second Kickstarter has done so damn well, like surpassed it, I think Shadowdark is definitely here to stay.
Well, I think the second Kickstarter is like throwing sand on the invisible halfling that's sneaking past you. So the halfling was there the whole time. Shadowdark was very successful. Tons of people were playing Shadowdark, but it was happening off grid for a lot of people. People did not see the halfling walking past them. But the second Kickstarter, poof, there's a whole bunch of sand. You can clearly see there are a ton of people playing Shadowdark.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. Like that, it was already there. It just cemented it and made it visible that there's a hunger for people to do. I knew there was a hunger there because of how everything was selling for me. People were definitely playing this game.
Yeah.
And people, I would talk to people on Twitter or whatever, and they'd be like, nobody plays Shadowdark. And I'm like, you are dead wrong, but you are so wrong. It's like, I'm selling all these books. They're definitely playing it. And people didn't believe it, and that's why that the second Kickstarter was important from a public relations point of view, like showing that yes, there's tons of people that are playing. They didn't just support the Kickstarter and then put the book on their shelf and walk away. Like they're playing it every week. It's a real thing.
Yeah, that's what I thought for the longest time. I really had this impression that the only people that were excited about Shadowdark were GMs. It seemed like I never really saw people playing, in the store or whatever. But I have definitely been proven wrong. And every time I've said something like that, there's been a lot of pushback.
Well, I think you hit at a kernel there. Shadowdark is one of the few games to come out with innovations on the GM side of things. It's very easy when you write something to offload things to the, well, I don't need to write a rule for that. I'll just have the GM make that rule, whatever. And that ends up being whole subsystems, whole things that the GM has to be responsible for. And people look at all these charts and tables and stuff in Shadowdark and they go, who cares if we have tables to roll up a city or a dungeon randomly, or to have all these different encounters by terrain type, or all this stuff, so that the GM doesn't have to think of that. A GM can just pick up the book, flip over, roll a dice. You run into two ogres. Like it's that simple to roll out. And that was one of the reasons why I started expanding on those tables as things that people would be interested in, saying, here's a D12 table. I'm going to give you a D20 table with even more stuff so that you can roll on either table if you want.
Yeah. That's in your DM's companion, right?
Yeah. GM's companion. Yeah.
That's something that just a quick point too, that is really great about Shadowdark is that, yes, ostensibly it's a dungeon crawler, but as you pointed out earlier, it can also handle solo play, and with all those tables, it can handle zero prep so well. I think, and I'm gonna maybe make some grognards mad here, I think it handles zero prep better than first edition D&D. And I'll even go even further to say I'm not even a fan of first edition AD&D because it's the appendices are a little too cumbersome. But Shadowdark, it's like, it's easy.
Yeah. But then, on the other side of that, though, another positive for it, and I think this has to do with maybe the sparseness of the system and the way in which she was so concise in writing it. We talk about this solo game. On the other side of that, you have something like the Shucked Oyster, which is a completely different product that is all about a bunch of, I mean, when I think about putting the Shucked Oyster in my game, I just see a bunch of dudes laughing it up, chuckle, har, having a great time, but it still fits. And I think that's really, I'm such a I'm such an OSE simp. Like I just really love the whole BX thing, you know, and it's hard for me. But like I don't know that I'd ever switch to like Shadowdark is my game. But there's so many good things about it, you know. It's if I were to put a bunch of house rules in my OSE game, it would just become Shadowdark. You know, with
well, I've had a lot of people tell me that they bought the GM companion and they use it with OSC or they use it with another system. Yeah,
it's very compatible. Like I bought Hellmarch the other day, the mass combat rules, easily
alchemical rakers
with, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is the thing about, you know, between Shadowdark and OSC and all that, there's just so much content out there. Before we even get into the third party stuff on DrivethRu, you know, all the old stuff, there's nothing that's old that can't be converted to Shadowdark very easily. So what do you think? What do you think we're going to see next with the third party products for Shadowdark?
I think that there's going to be people that are going to follow. I'm not saying they're going to necessarily follow it because I came up with it, but I think it's the next evolution, which is to take the principles that make Shadowdark work the way it does and apply them to a different setting, to a totally different, not just setting, but like, you know, world that we normally see associated very strictly with a legacy system. For me, it's going to be Vampire. So Vampire, the way it's run is very, you know, not everybody, obviously, but the predominant way that it's run is very political, very slow. There's the kind of people who write a 10-page character sheet before they show up at your session kind of thing. I mean, everybody you talk to has a preconceived notion of how Vampire is, and a lot of them are very negative. What I saw in Vampire is an opportunity to use, I've described it as a sine wave from high school math, right? So in Shadowdark, there are systems that drag you down as you go up. So you start to, you know, your character's doing what you're starting to make money, and then there's the temptation of carousing that drags your money back down, right? So everything comes at you, it rises and then it goes back down. You gain hit points, but the monsters are gaining extra die damage on you, so you're actually more in danger of getting killed sometimes at 5th level than at first level, because at least at first level they're only rolling 1d6, but now they might be rolling 3d6, and if they get 3 6s, you're gone, right? So there's this sine wave function, and I was like, this is what I want for Vampire, is I want you to be waking up every night and knowing that you're going to have to really work to make it to the next dawn. Yeah, like you're going to have to kick ass, because you're not going to be sitting around going, oh, I'm going to put my money in Apple stocks and wait 10 years and then I'm going to have $1 million. And then no, someone's going to kill you in the next 3 hours if you don't do these things, right? And so I ran up my first play test of it. The guys woke up. They were in the game uses neighborhoods in the same way that Shadowdark uses districts in a city. And in their district, there was a point of interest of a hospital. They go to the hospital and they start exploring. I have a node-based mapping system to just make a map on the fly for whatever building you go into. And then you're just randomly rolling it like a Shadowdark dungeon creation. And you roll it out, and they kept going through. And eventually they walked into a room where there were, I rolled a random thing, 2d6 criminals. Now, criminal is just like a level 1 mook, but there's 12 of them, and there were only 3 characters. And they just started getting their ass kicked, and they had to run away. And they ended up having to use a vampire power in the presence of these guys to get away. And so now they have 12 people they have to kill because if they don't kill them, then that becomes torch and pitchforks coming after them. So they had to pull back and regroup. They killed two. They picked off two of the guys. There's still 10 guys to kill, and the session ended with still 6 hours left in the night. Before they were at midnight, basically. They have to kill these guys before dawn, right? If they don't, they're screwed. So every night is this Shadowdark where you have to, and you're trying to just get enough money so maybe you can get that assault rifle because you just have a pistol right now, like that kind of thing. Like you're really trying to just fingernails on the edge of the cliff, like you're just barely about to survive. And that's what I think people really like about Shadowdark. They like that risk. They like going into that situation where they could get killed if they aren't paying attention, and then they just roll a new character. And that's the same thing. So I think adapting these systems to new settings, right? Just within the past couple weeks, as I'm finishing up this vampire thing, I'm like, hey, I could add a subsystem here for running randomized heists, and you could turn this into Grand Theft Auto, the role-playing game. You could do that. Oh yeah, you have randomization systems to create locations, problems, stories, and all this stuff. And then you build it onto a chassis where every second you're about to die. Like that's the formula.
Do you run are any of your games, I guess what we'd call plot driven, or are they all sandbox, take the job, do the job, get the reward?
It builds into that because I build out whatever the random encounter is, right? So like, this is kind of people's criticism of random encounters is, well, what does that tell you? Well, if you're walking in the forest and I roll up that there's 4 goblins, then now I'm creating a goblin village nearby. I'm creating these goblins have objectives. If they get away from this encounter, they're going to go back to that village. That's going to start to cause problems. So every time that I make a roll, it builds the thing for me in real time. I don't have to write and prep that out in before the game starts. I can just build it on immediately. I could pick up. I wish I had the prescience to have designed Shadow Sun with a map that worked this way, but I could just pick up Shadow Rim. You could roll characters, and I could be running it in 5 minutes. I don't need to have anything prepped, right? And the Shadowdark descriptions of everything are so short that if I need to read something because you walked into a hex, it'll take me a minute. And then I know what's there, right? Like it's not going to be a 2-page description of the town of whatever the fuck. It's going to be, maybe 4 stores, and then the rest of it's just up to me to roll with. That's all I got to know. So that's the thing, is being able to just pick it up and go, but build it out as you go. Don't build it out ahead of time. Build it out from what you're creating at the table.
I'm sold. I believe you. I believe
you could do that in your game where they're exploring the new world, right?
Well, that's kind of what's going on. So there are certain things I want. There's no plot. There are certain things I want to have that I've just been. I mean, if I'm going to draw a dungeon or whatever it is, right? I want to know, but it's pretty random at this point. I mean, which is sort of new for me because I've always had games that had a direction. I think except when I was a kid. I think this is the closest I've gotten to how we played when I was a kid.
Let me give you this is from a Shadowdark game. I was a player. I love being a player. I don't get to play that much because I'm running my own stuff. Or like when Acts 2 came out, I was like, I have to run this now. But yeah.
We'll get to that.
But, we're in a Shadowdark campaign. I'm 4th level, which means we've been playing for quite some time. And
right.
We were in this town. There's a guy who we knew, the ruler of the town, has been plotting to invade our hometown by allying himself with orcs, right? So we find that out, and then we find out that his second in command hates orcs, and the leader has been kind of keeping this plot on the down low from his own guy, right? So that's all the GM had to provide us. We started going, okay, so we need to arrange secret meetings with this captain of the guard and tell him about the thing with the orcs. So then we follow him, we get his path through the city, we find a way to separate him, we have a conversation, we come up with a plot with him, we send it back, right? Then we go, okay, we're going to come up with a way to assassinate this guy who's the leader of the town. So then we come up with that. All of it's player driven, right? And there were several times when I was sure that we were going to get betrayed and murdered and thrown out of the castle. I mean, like it was brutal. But the GM just was like, no, like you guys, you came up with a plan. I'm going to go with it unless there's some obvious problem with your plan. And he just, it's easy to write GM advice of, reward the players when they come up with ideas and stuff like that. But
Right.
yeah, that's what he did. He just said, you guys came with it. We ended up killing the guy and deposing him, and now, we go rolling on. He didn't have to write any of that. He just responded to what we did.
Hey, DM Cloaker asks, in creating Shadow Sun, what did you find was actually worth omitting or updating versus the legacy material that you did not anticipate until you really dove into it?
Well, I didn't include a lot of the Templar type, Druid type structure of it. I do have a nature magic system. I didn't want to emulate the social structure too closely in Dark Sun, because there's a very specific way that all the city states have their governments and everything. I didn't want to get into that, so I wanted to make sure that I was making things that there's a concern. I don't want people to be like, you're ripping off Dark Sun either. Like I'm trying to write something that's
Right.
so there was a lot of times where I would be like, what would go here that would not be from Dark Sun, but would be something I'm adding into the setting, right? So there's like one of the city states is on the plane of shadow, which is always dark at all times of some magical darkness. And the ruler of the city state is not a sorcerer king, it's a vampire, right? Now, all the city states aren't run by vampires, but just adding some things in there for distinction, so that it's different. I tried to come up with as many different monsters as I could. Some of that was bound by I had, there's not a lot of Dark Sun themed artwork in the stock art community, so I tried to work with what I had. There's a lot of animal art that comes from public domain sources. So like it might be a stingray. So I made a stingray monster that comes underneath the sand and comes up out of, stuff like that. So try to use that. One of the only real criticisms that I get is that I didn't perfectly copy Dark Sun. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can't.
Right.
That was going to be my next question: is how much hell did you get?
People are like,
not
well, why didn't you do
making
this
it
exactly like it is in Dark Sun? And I'm like, because I don't want to get sued by Wizards of the Coast. That's why.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, speaking of what you did with Dark Sun, this might get me in trouble with some of our viewers. I've never played Skyrim. And
it's okay. We're all kids once,
but what did you do to sort of translate from the video game to this setting that's not Skyrim, but wink wink?
Well, in Skyrim, I think you could make a good argument I was more faithful of a conversion. My goal was to use the randomization systems that Kelsey has to create things that feel like playing the video game, right? So, for instance, when you start playing Skyrim, you've never played it before, right? So when there's plants you can just pick in the world. There's monsters that when you kill, they drop one of these things. There's alchemical ingredients, right? And each one of these things. So let's say that you get troll fat from killing a troll, right? Well, if you just eat the troll fat, you'll learn the first property of the troll fat, right? So let's say it's not, but let's say it's invisibility. I wish it was invisibility. God, that would be great. But no, it's not invisibility. So you eat the troll fat and you turn invisible for like 1 second and come pop back and you go, okay, so this causes invisibility. So then later you pick a snowberry, and when you do it with the snowberry, it's also invisibility. So if you put the snowberry and the troll fat into a potion, it will make an invisibility potion, right? So that's how you learn. Well, what happens in real life is that after you've played the game for about maybe 2 hours, you go on the wiki and you look up all of the ingredients, right? Okay. And each one of them has 4 possible things that you can discover about it through experimentation. So maybe the troll fat has invisibility and resist frost and slow and some other resist poison, whatever. And then if you start combining things that have multiple traits, you can create an invisibility potion that also gives you resist fire or something like that, right? But like I said, people just use the wiki and they learn everything right away, right? So I was like, how can you recapture that magic of first playing Skyrim when you don't know any of that stuff? So I said, well, if every time you learn one of these effects, it's rolled randomly off of a table, there's no way for you to know in advance what this troll fat does, right? So in your game of Shadowrim, you get a piece of troll fat, you eat it, it's invisibility. Gary gets one, he eats it, it's poison damage. Like whatever it is, like it's different. Every person's game will be different, right? And so that's the thing, is I tried to come up with mechanics that would recreate what it feels like in the game, not exactly how it is, but like that sensation of playing the game. So in Skyrim, there's an enchantment system. So you can enchant magic item. And in order to power them, you have to capture the souls of things that are dying. So there's a magic spell that does. So like if you do it on a wolf, you get like a weak soul of an animal. If you do it on a huge demon, then it's a powerful soul, right? I don't want to get into all the mechanics of it, but so it's like, so I said in Shadowrim, what's going to be is when you go to create a magic item, if you have a weak soul, you can affect the little properties of the magic item in Shadowdark, like that it glows a little bit or it smells like ferns or whatever it is. And then if you have the more powerful souls, you can add the benefits. She's got the random benefit rolls to create these magic items. And if you have the most powerful souls, you can remove the curses of the magic items in Shadowdark. So it's a similar system to how Shadowdark makes magic items, but you as the player are making them. They're not being made by you're rolling off the table as the player, enchanting this magic sword or whatever. And the souls that you bring to the table will affect how good the magic item is. Right. So it's things like that. Like I had just experimented with different ways of creating that, because people love picking up a non-magical sword in the game and going over to the workbench thing and be like, and now I've got a +2 magic sword. Like that's
right.
Awesome. Like people love that. So like let's recreate that feeling.
I think that's I'm sure there's other systems out there, game systems out there, but it's probably pretty rare. I don't typically see crafting rules. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a TTRPG. So that's awesome. I think we got another Rumble rant from Ultra.
Get out.
I know.
Money.
I know. They love us. I once had an elven mace in Skyrim for my character. I smithed it up to superior and gave it to the soul tier property to refill my crystals once they died. I called it my superior Hawktua. Okay. This was all because I've never played the game. I just was like gibberish. Superior Hawktua. Love it. Okay.
I recently played Red Dead Redemption 2 again, and I named my horse Hawktua. So that was good.
Bro,
that was a good name for a horse.
I remember one night I was playing Red Dead 2, and my oldest son walks in the living room with my youngest holding his hand. I think my youngest was like 5 at the time. My oldest was like 13. And they're both just looking at me, and I'm fishing on Red Dead. And the oldest goes, Dad, I've just never seen you look so peaceful before. He was just like, I've never seen you so relaxed. Are you okay?
There's certain places, like if you get in one of those long canoes and you head out into the open water and kind of just drift along and do some fishing. It's nice.
Dude, I can lose whole days to that game.
The most relaxing game.
It's one of the inspirations for my game right now.
You should try this game. There's this game called The Long Dark. And it's a survival game where your plane goes down in northern Canada. And the game has this, similar to Shadowdark, I guess, now that I think about it, has this intensity loop. So you have time where you're running around, you're freezing to death, you have no food, you're doing all these things. You get to a place where you can finally rest, you make a little fire, and then you're like sitting there and there's the crackling of the fire and there's the wind outside because it's like a blizzard or whatever. And you're just sitting there like making rabbit stew or whatever, right? And it's like this nice peaceful thing. And so like it brings you down, and then you run out of meat. You got to go back out there. So then you go back up into the intensity. Yeah. And then you got wolves chasing you, you got bears and all this crap, and then you get back inside, you make another little fire. Yeah, it's good. It's an interesting loop.
When you're running games, do you get any? What's your outside of games? What's your inspiration for games? Like obviously you've got Skyrim and the Shadow Sun and all that kind of good stuff. But I mean, what is it? I guess what's your appendix in? I hate to be so.
For me, a lot of it is movies.
What's your appendix
movies and video games? My first job when I was 15 was at a movie theater all the way up until I was 18. So I got to see so many movies, and this was when awesome. Gladiator came out.
Oh, wow.
I would take my 15-minute breaks and go watch Gladiator for 15 minutes and then go back. And I remember that I've watched Gladiator so many times as like a patchwork quilt of moments. But yeah, I mean, things like that. And then I am a huge history buff, and I love playing games where you change history, and that makes it every time it's a different story, right? Because you're changed. So like, I love Crusader Kings. Crusader Kings 3 is the newest one. And you can start as basically anybody in medieval Europe, and there's different starting points. 1066 for William the Conqueror's invasion of England, and I like to do, I think it's 786 or 784, I can't remember, when the Vikings hit the first monastery at Lindisfarne. And I picked that start date recently, and I played as the Vikings that were in charge of what's now York, Yarvik. And I started there, took over all the British Isles, took over France, took over northern Germany and the Netherlands and so on. And I'm converting them all to Odin, right? So Catholicism's on the run. I'm smushing Catholicism between me and Orthodox Christianity. I'm just I'm with it. My current leader's grandson will conquer the Pope. He will be the one who conquers the Pope. And that, by doing that, you start to just see history not as a series of things that happened, but as all the potential things that could have happened that didn't.
Right.
What if the Muslims had won the Reconquista? What happens if the Byzantine Empire had defeated the Caliphate. What happened? What happens if this? So then when I start rolling things differently in a role-playing game, like right now I have an Al-Qadim adaptation that's in design phase. It's been there for a while. You add a little bit over time. And I've included a lot of things that I know from history. I've included a group that's more like the Turks that comes in on mounts and steals stuff and rides away. And then I have more sedentary, fortified ones that are more like the Cordoban Caliphate in Spain. I've got trying to create just tapping into different things. And a lot of help comes from the fact that I use public domain art for a lot of things. There's a lot of architecture, public domain art, and you can get a little archway that looks like it's from Cordoba. You can get a yurt that looks like it's from the Ozgug Turks. All these different things, and inspires you.
Are you altering that artwork in any way? Are you using
Well,
programs
let
for
me.
that? Or are you
I'll
taking
show
that
you with a
artwork
map.
raw?
Let me actually pull this up.
Sure, that'd be great.
So this is a public domain image from NASA. NASA is your best friend if you want to write role playing.
Actually,
yeah, I'm
can
going
you
to share
share
right
that?
now.
Can we
I've
share
turned
that on
it
screen?
sideways, but
Okay,
I
great.
think you can recognize this landmass. Okay, right?
Let's see, hold on a second.
Everybody. Oh, you're not yet?
I'm not
There it
getting
is.
yet.
Right?
There we go.
All right.
There we
Now,
go.
so this is just
Okay.
a topographical map from NASA. Right? Okay. I think, how could I use this for role-playing games? Well, look at the shapes here. You got Lake Victoria. You got all these lakes in an arc here. And you've got this kind of weird, this is the Rift Valley, Great Rift Valley in Ethiopia. Right? Okay. This is the same landmass. I've used Photoshop filters and added hexes. There's Lake Victoria.
Nice.
There's the Arc. There's the Great Rift Valley. I just put it in Photoshop. You start doing, there's layer effects that you can use. There's render filters. You can change it so that it looks more like a painting. You can change it so it looks like it's watercolor. You can do all these different effects to turn it into this looks like a role-playing game map, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
if you saw this, would you be like, oh my gosh, there's Lake Victoria?
No.
Most people would not, right? You can adapt public domain stuff like that all the time. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Kind of going back to some of the design stuff. I kind of know the answer to this question, but I want to sort of get your take on it. When you approach something that you're working on, are you thinking in terms of designing something so a game master has the tools to kind of create their own sort of story arcs, or are you more focused on open world hex crawl type settings?
Shadowrim is probably what I think is my ideal, what I'd like to get as a GM. So there's settlements that are pretty well described. They're far enough apart that if I want to add one as a GM, I can totally do that, right? They're far enough apart that getting to the next town is a challenge, right? That's kind of the gold standard for me on settlement.
Yeah.
Then there's locations that are on the map, but they're spread out far enough that if the GM wants to put a whole dungeon in there from, if he wants to put Caverns of Thracia in Hex 2416, that's totally fine. He can do that. But there's enough framework there that if the GM doesn't have any ideas, they can roll with that. And then there's random encounters to add all that. If somebody's crossing 2 or 3 empty hexes from it's not written down perspective, and I don't have anything I want to put there, I can just roll a few random encounters and add it there. I think it generally I would write what I would like to see as a GM to help me figure it out. And like even in like a dungeon room type situation, you can over describe things to the point that the GM has when I'm running, a lot of times they'll be like, well, we're going to turn and go down this hallway and stuff. And I've got 3 minutes to prepare for whatever's on the other side of that door. And I want to just be able to read 1 or 2 paragraphs. I don't want to have a 2-column description of what's in that room, you know?
Yeah.
And I need to be able to figure it out really quickly. That was one of the reasons why I started coming up with the icons in Terra Invictus, was like, how could I make it so if the GM gets asked, you know, I'm looking for this, they can just look at the description and find the right icon and go, yes, there is a guy in this town who does that, you know, without having to fumble around. And that's, you know, I don't use box text for that reason, because I don't want the GM to have to be sucking up bandwidth in their brain doing that. And it's kind of, you know, I want the GM is a co-creator with the writer, he's not
like that.
downstream. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, you know, I always feel like when you're entering into any creative endeavor, one of the first things you want to know are what your limits are, sort of your guide rails, right? You need to stay within this to make the thing you want to make. And the best setting books or the best expansion books are not the ones that tell you what to do. They're just the ones that show you how it works. And then after that, it's yours. And that is something that I really appreciate about Shadowdark. You know, there's so far, you know, everything is implied. I don't feel like I'm going to screw the world up when I play a game.
The more lore that you get that gets created, the more the GM has to remember at any given time. I think it's useful to think of it like, sorry, you haven't played Skyrim for this, Matt, but if you're making a video game, every time the player picks up a cup and moves it, every time they put something in a treasure chest, everything that has to be remembered.
Right.
And the more that happens, that you see this with older video games, the save file at the end of the game is massively bloated because the game's trying to remember that they left 400 pumpkins inside that guy's house. And then over here, they saved the 86 potions of invisibility that they found, and so on. And the game has to remember all that. The more you create for the GM to remember, the same the GM's brain only has a certain amount of bandwidth for processing, just like a computer. You know, you can't say, here, absorb this 500-page book and run it all night. You know, like it doesn't work.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of the older IP worlds from Wizards, well, TSR to Wizards, suffered because they just kept adding and adding and adding and adding to all this lore. Like, I have such a fond memory of Forgotten Realms first edition. Like, I remember the way the box set smelled when I first picked it up.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, it was
it had those cool like overlays. Remember the like, plastic overlay?
Picking up that box set was as sort of momentous for me as it was when I picked up the red box set and started like playing the game. And over time, it just became like this giant like soap opera where I kind of grabbed the moniker to my friends who were all like into Dritz and stuff. He doesn't exist in my Forgotten Realms. Nothing is canon became like my moniker for the longest time. I don't care what's in the books because I need to be able to run a game, you know?
Yeah. Anytime I run in an IP, typically the first like arc or the first adventure is me purposely having the players screw canon up. Like every story. Just so you guys understand.
All right, we gotta
this
We got a
season
super
gets
chat
better.
from Flint Fire Force. Thanks, man. We appreciate it. How much Rob AI do you use in creating your products? Advice for creators and AI. Ooh, spicy question.
Well, I make a lot of jokes about Rob AI because Rob Conley is an AI. I don't know that he would agree if I called him an enthusiast, but I think he is an enthusiast, at least an aficionado. But he has very different perspective than me on AI. I've seen AI in my work a lot. I'm not going to get into that, but I have a lot of experience with it. So I'm not saying this from a position of ignorance, right? The problem is that it doesn't understand what you're talking about. And since it doesn't understand what you're talking about, it doesn't see the connections between things that make important points for humans. So the example I like to use is that there are stories like this a lot, but I think this is the best one because I love the visuals and the ideas that come up when you talk about it. But some guy asked ChatGPT how to clean his washing machine, and it gave him a series of instructions. Now, I have no idea what it was pulling from to create these series of instructions, but if somebody were to actually follow the instructions, they would have accidentally created chlorine gas. It was asking him to put like vinegar and this together
It's
with
trying to
this
kill
other
us.
thing, and then put some, and it would have killed everyone in the house if this guy had followed through the instructions. And the reason why it did that is because it can't connect the two ideas. It doesn't know. You could say, which is worse, for me to murder Gary or for me to use this racial slur against Matt? And it will go, well, I think using the racial slur is worse. And you're like, what?
I'm a dead man.
Because it
I'm
can't
very sensitive.
make a decision like that, right? Like it doesn't have the ability to think in that way. And so when you ask it to make things,
fuck that, Wibbs. And that's wrong. I tried using Grok the other day, dude. Grok is about as clumsy as my grandma in the kitchen a year before she died. Dude, Grok cannot handle that. I gotta hate on for Grok. I have tried. Let me tell you, AI. I got real excited about AI, guys. When I was doing prep for The Row, which I swear to God will be my last story game for at least a year. I swear to you it will be. I loved AI. It was me. I would type in all these things about a character. It would get an image that would be really close. Plus, it was sort of this modern day time. So there was a fashion. I think it was real easy for it to do. As soon as the more you use AI, the more holes you see in it. I feel
I
like.
agree with that.
And one thing I will say about AI, and I know that me and Matt, there's gonna come a night. I know it's gonna be just me and Matt. Brian might be here to keep us from killing each other, but we're gonna have to have.
I think we're gonna get a panel going. I think that might be more fun. Yeah.
You want to do a panel? Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can call some people.
I'll do it. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a blight. That'd be great. It makes people think that they have skills that they don't have. It makes people assume a level of confidence that in an answer that they don't have.
I think it has uses, but I don't think so. For example, I think it's perfectly acceptable to write something and write it as well as you can. Put it into AI for spelling and grammar, and possibly to punch it up a little bit. I don't see a problem necessarily with that, as long as you wrote, the core. I know.
My position is a little different.
AI, I just give them a simple challenge. Open up Grok. I have Grok because I'm a blue check mark on Twitter, and you open up Grok and you say, "Give me 10 ideas for a random encounter," and you provide some whatever on the desert island or on a mountain or whatever you want to do. And it can probably give you about 10 ideas, right? But then you say, give me 10 more ideas. And the next 10 ideas will almost all be variations of the original 10 ideas.
Right.
And then you say, give me 10 more ideas. And all it will do is continue to vary those things. So it can create just a little bit of variation, but then it gets stuck in tropes. It gets stuck in recurring patterns, and it can't come up with it. Whereas I could sit down and come up with, off the top of my head, 400. We could just sit here all day. I could just keep boom, 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 because I know the difference between number 1 and number 15 and number 30, and the AI can barely even remember what it just told you, because it takes so much computational ability to do what it does that it will forget things it's told you already. You can ask it, if you ask it sufficiently complex questions, it'll just fail. Like, how many prime numbers are there between these 5 ranges of numbers? Don't give it like 1 to 1,000. Say, how many prime numbers are between 5 and 82 and 68 and 31? Yeah, like, and just start have the numbers go forward and backwards and backwards and forward. Eventually, it'll just be like 8. No, that's not right.
Yeah, right.
Know how to do it.
Yeah. My experience with AI, and I just want to say this, and then we can move on, because I know.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't think. I think where people are being tripped up is they're relying too much on it to do, like you mentioned, like do the work for them. Like, I don't think it's a problem. Like, I've been experimenting with it. Like, I came up with this wacky idea for like a necromancer punk band cult, and I just started talking to ChatGPT about it. And just as a kind of an experiment, and it would say some stuff. Some of it was kind of cool, some of it wasn't, but it would ended up prompting me, and then I'd come up with some more ideas. So it ended up becoming more like a conversation, which was odd. It was almost like actually having, like, being able to bounce ideas off a wall with somebody. But
even that eventually comes into
I know. Well, yeah,
nonsense. You've only got
that's
so
why
many
you don't
rounds of
rely
that,
on it. You just, like I said, it became like more of a.
Yeah.
It ended up prompting me, which then got me really curious. So then I started a whole nother thread with ChatGPT, and I got kind of personal. I started asking it questions if it gets jealous of Grok, and things like that. And we got philosophical, and at one point I'm like, are you prompting me or whatever? So anyway, long story short, I see I don't think AI is going to advance much further than this, or you know what I mean? But I see it more like I don't think I think it will get better, but I don't think it's going to actually be an artificial sentient being. I just don't think it will. I think what we're going to get is from the game Mass Effect. You'd bump into these like virtual assistants on the Citadel. I think it's going to be like that, where you're just like, hey man, I got this problem. Can you help me out? It spits out some information. Then you kind of work with it. You're like, okay, thanks. And then you close it and you go on with your day or finish your project or whatever. So
I think it's going to be I think it's going to be good enough that the world that we were born into will be considered a fantasy world in the next 100 years.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, it's going to, in the next 50 years, even quicker. Anyway, we can go on AI.
We have gone on it.
I'm not against. I'm not anti-AI, but I do think it's best used as a tool to hone your work as opposed to do your work.
It drives me nuts when I see someone cut and paste and then like, oh, check out my thing. I'm like, but anyway,
authenticity will be the new gold standard for what actually gets purchased, because everybody will be filling their stuff with loads and loads of just generic AI written crap, and the human actually produced by a human will be worth something.
It'll have that feel. It's like when you hear music and you hear that first guitar strum, and you can just that's Jimi Hendrix's fingers on the guitar from one chord. And that's going to be the difference between humans and AI. AI can make music. We've all seen it. We've all heard it. Anyway, I don't give a shit about that anymore. Chubby, what's next for you? Like what I have to imagine that as a creator, you've done a lot of projects that are kind of these one shot, these great, I mean, you have a really great mind for this. You seem to know what people are going to want. You jump in at the right times for things. What do you have next? What's your Everest? Like, what are you looking to do? What are you going to do, Chubby? Impress me, bro.
Well,
Come on.
I'm just now getting to the point where I have the money from my work. I've had the money for a while, but not to spend on art. But
Gotcha.
money that I could use to buy enough art to make whatever I want, rather than being dependent on stock or public domain adaptations and so on. So I would really, my Everest would be writing a Mass Effect Star Wars kind of hybrid as a sci-fi game, and being able to afford art to make it a unique piece. That is a huge Everest for anyone anyone who's ever tried to actually make a role-playing game. The amount of art and the cost and the complexity of a sci-fi game compared to a medieval fantasy game. There's all kinds of, it's a huge ask. Even right now, I don't have enough money right now. Like, I'm starting to get into that realm.
Okay, real quick, I've got to ask, because me and Matt have been talking about this art thing. It kind of started from AI, but then we got into the whole art thing for games. I'm curious. I did some research, and I'm just curious. A good illustration from an artist for a game is going to run you approximately. Do you mind telling us approximately how much money you're going to pay for that?
About a half page. Going across the bottom, half page piece might be like 100 to 150. But you could get like a spot, just one character for like a quarter of a page for maybe 50 to 100. And it depends on the artist. It depends on the complexity and the quality of the art. If you want to go, if you go to your standard is this needs to be as good as West End Games D6 Star Wars quality, that is going to cost you a lot more than it just being
how much?
A generic black and white line art kind of appearance.
So I've been doing some research. Because I'm very sympathetic to artists. For me, art, it's incredibly important when I'm reading the game.
Yeah.
I feel like, when you read a comic book, there's this weird thing that happens to you where your intellectual brain is taking care of the language portion of it. And then this other part of your brain is looking at the art, and it's activated at the same time. And it creates a different experience. And I believe something similar happens in role-playing games. I think art is integral to what's happening while you're reading those rules. As me and Matt have been talking about this art thing and AI and how much game art costs and all of this, I did some research. A starting artist at Marvel Comics makes between $150 to $300 per page of line art. And when we talk about page, we're talking about Bristol board with, 6 or more panels, action panels with more than one character doing shit, not just posing. And I'm just really curious, because I'm going to tell you the truth. The game art that I see doesn't match the quality of comic book art. So why is it? Like, why aren't you guys going to conventions and talking to if you go to a comic book convention, there's this place called Artist Alley, and you get everything from independent, artists who, by the way, are making $50 to $150 a page, a full page.
They're probably being bought at that's at a discount because they're buying a certain number of pages. You know, like they might be buying 40 or 50 pages all at once.
Shit.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, they're buying roughly, if it's per issue, these days they're buying 19 to
So
22.
yeah, so there's
Yeah,
a
you're
definitely a
probably right
discount for
there.
bulk, you know. But
Mhm.
the thing with the AI is no way of getting around this because the AI can't consistently create the same character or whatever. So yeah,
No,
so
it
you can't.
cannot. Even if
Yeah,
you put the same prompt in
yeah.
with a different pose.
Even if you're really good at whatever the thing is, you'll draw one character that is your Viking with a beard and holding a shield and doing this thing, and then when you need that character to be doing something slightly different, it will be a totally different person. You know, like I mean, you if you want to create a consistent style through the whole book, you have to either be extremely good at art direction and finding all of the pieces that would fit perfectly, or you have to just pay a person to create that consistent feel, right?
Right.
It's just the way it is. I don't know of anybody who's like there's I've seen some AI art that looks good, but it's just one piece. It's not a collect because you can't maintain that through a bunch of
It can't
pieces,
be a
right?
collection.
So
Yep.
if you say, give me a guy that looks like he might work for the Rebel Alliance and he's in a hallway and he does whatever, but then the next time you ask for a guy from the Rebel Alliance, he's going to have a slightly different helmet and a slightly different outfit. You're not going to get the same uniform between guys. You're not. Gary's cat's
That will be
legs were
overcome
just
one day,
stretching
I
out
think.
right next to your head, dude.
Yeah. But the thing is that could be overcome
Yeah.
any day now.
Yeah.
You know, these are technological limitations.
I
that
can
will
tell
eventually be
you.
overcome. I can't believe we fucking stepped into AI.
I know.
I'm
It's all
My
right.
bad.
It's well, I feel like I need to be the counterpoint too because I experiment with it a lot because it's fun. Mid-Journey has gotten a lot better with some of the consistency. It's not perfect. So yeah, I do think it's coming. And I think it really depends. Like what I think is likely to happen for creators in this space, they'll be shilling out some money for a good cover, you know, a human art cover, but you're going to see like the internal stuff like, oh, I have like this little monster I came up with, you know, and that might be a little AI here, a little AI there, some filler. And I personally don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, especially if it helps keeps costs down, you know. The hobby is an expensive hobby. But yeah, but at the same time though, I don't think AI will get anywhere near as good as like Larry Elmore's or Zach S. Like they're just but I look at it as like a
You
bell
can't make
curve,
an easily cover with AI.
you know. But it's
you
like
can't,
the
man.
problem is, and the artists in the industry need to recognize this. It's like the bell curve. A vast majority of you are in the middle, and that is also a target reticle. AI is going to be able to do if it's not already doing what you're doing. So either up your game or figure some way to adapt. I personally would not have a problem. You know, I've been wanting to try this. Like I just don't have a project for it where I like bring in an artist to be my art director and I go, look, you're the one that's going to draw everything, and I don't care if you use AI to help you do it, but that way we'll have a consistent style throughout the whole thing, and maybe.
But if he uses AI, it won't be
you
consistent.
haven't practiced it
We've
enough.
totally derailed this. Chubby, talk to us about Shadowdark, man. Tell us some Shadowdark stuff, quick.
Well,
quick, brother.
Keep going with it. I'm not going to be climbing my Everest tomorrow, so right now I'm trying. I have a problem with sticking to one thing. I get easily distracted, and so I try to move between. So when you say, you know, I came out with Shadow Sun, I came out with Shadow Rim, and I went in this direction, I went another direction. Yeah, that's because my brain was going in all of those directions the entire time, and it just got they just got completed on different days. You know, like it spread out over time. So I've been working on the Al Qadim thing that I talked about. I've been sketching out what I would do for ancestries and classes and coming up with stuff like that, but it's still in a design phase. I use notepad documents on my phone so that like when I'm sitting around watching Law and Order with my wife or whatever, I'm bored, I just start coming up with ideas and putting them in there. I've written whole books on vacations before because my wife likes to just sit out and watch the beach, and I'm just sitting on the porch with her looking out at the beach, and I'm just just typing it out. Terra Invictus got written in Florida on a vacation. I was just typing it out. So the whole, I had a map on my phone that I usually make my maps first, and then I just start filling everything in piecemeal. So I'll start completing one part, and then I'll get distracted. I'll go do something else. So I've worked off and on the Al-Qadim thing. I've worked off and on building out a player companion for the Western Reaches. It won't be called that, but it'll be basically, that's what it is. The same kind of ideas from the player companion, but for Western Reaches. And then maybe that'll be followed up with a GM version. I don't know, but she's innovating.
Yeah.
You can tell in the preview documents, she's innovating the racial design with the half elf. She's like, the half elf has a whole chart of how to get trinkets. We don't even know what these trinkets will do. Like, what's she going to do with that? So I've kind of started building frameworks out for that. My way of working is to build. I work in layout because I do layout for my job, right? And so I will build out the chart that'll only have 4 entries in it. And then, I'll think of an entry, I'll go open the file, I'll put it in. Now it's got 5 entries in it, right? And then over time it gets filled up. So when I have an idea of this is the direction I'm going to go, I'll start doing the layout and just leaving it with empty, boxes, and then I'll just fill them in as they come to me. And if I get to a point where I need to make this in 2 pages, then that's what happens. But it comes from being filled up like buckets, just adding all the time.
When I write, I start with a table of contents, and then I just fill in
exactly.
underneath.
And I do maps like that map I just showed you. I made while I was on a conference call where I didn't have to talk, and it took me about 45 minutes. I took that file and I put it in Photoshop, and I would just, because my creative right brain part will be able to totally function independently from the left brain part. I paid total attention to that conference call. I just didn't have to talk. So my right brain was just working the whole time on a creative thing, and my left brain was paying attention to what they were saying. So it's 45 minutes. Now I have a map. So then that map becomes, okay, well, what are we going to put on this map? Is this going to be, if I add a little bit of a blue filter, it becomes more of an icy northern thing. If I add a little bit of a yellow filter, it becomes more of a desert. If I want to pump up the green and kind of make it more jungle, whatever I want to do with that map. And then I'll go, okay, well, let's say I want to make it like, I want to steal Gary's idea and make it into a new world, right? So then I start putting tribes out there in this map, and I start building all kinds of, this is where this settlement is, and this is where that, the ships from the mainland are coming. They're coming here, and that's how I work. So I've got 4 or 5 projects like that right now that are just in the. I had I made a cover and a logo and some stuff for a Red Dead 2 adaptation of Shadowdark. And I just put, I have like a notepad document with an outline and the logo and stuff, but I haven't developed it any further than that. And I'll come back to it later.
Yeah.
If I did,
I would love to see your Red Dead adaptation.
I was going to call it American Venom.
That would be great. And can please put in some fishing and hunting rules. You gotta put in some fish.
That could be your carousing system. You're in between
Oh.
adventures. Gary's going to go fishing. He makes a roll. He gets an outcome.
Absolutely. Oh, that would be great. You know, do you think there's something inherent about Shadowdark itself that lends itself to all these different things? You know, you've listed off so many different ideas in so many different genres. Is there just something inherent about that system that makes it open to that?
Diminish
or-
her by saying this. I don't mean it, but it's basically the 6-stat system that's been around from the beginning is the core. You know,
Yeah.
you can take that. That's what's powered all. All these, even the game like Star Wars D6, or whether you're talking about even story games in some sense. The idea that you've got a set of numbers that you can use to make rolls to resolve outcomes, that's at the core. I think what Shadowdark brings specifically is that it has advantage and disadvantage specifically so that you don't have to track 4 or 5 modifiers on the same roll. Either you're either saying I've got +1 to hit because I'm an orc, or you're getting advantage disadvantage.
Right.
There's not a stack of +1 from this and +2 from that and plus whatever. That's why.
Right.
And so when people go, I hate advantage disadvantage, it's like, well, you just like looking up a whole bunch of modifiers like in 3rd edition or 4th edition or whatever.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
and there are, it's funny because I think one of the reasons, and you were here last week, you were in chat when I was going back and forth between OSE and Shadowdark and yada yada, and what am I going to use for the system? I think for me, it's kind of the lack. It is the looseness of some of the rules, that is kind of, it doesn't turn me off as much as it makes me. I'm just kind of like, well, hang on, guys, like. I need these rules, and I know I can make them myself. I know I could import something, but I guess Shadowdark's just such an open system. You can really just do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
If I wanted to change it, I can change it.
That's one of the reasons why I bring up the kind of sine wave thing, is that the sine wave can be adapted to whatever you need it to be, and carousing is a big part of the downward of the sine wave. So it's easy for me, at least, to find ways of adapting carousing to other systems, right? So if you wanted to make a Lord of the Rings one, the One Ring has a fellowship phase where you're going back and you're spending time with your family and you're doing things like that, or whatever. You could turn that into your carousing system. You could get Star Wars. You have a time where everybody's going to kind of take a break for a little bit and spend some of their money. And maybe Han Solo goes out to Ord Mantell and runs into a bounty hunter and comes back. And that's his carousing outcome. And then you all come back together to try to escape from Hoth, whatever it is. And you can adapt those things to whatever you need it to be. And advantage and disadvantage makes it so you don't have to worry about all this would give me a +2 and this would give me a +1. That's wiped away. The monster descriptions are so short, you're trying to just give each monster 2 or 3 abilities at most. Everything is pushed towards that minimalist design. And so if I want to write a stormtrooper for Shadowdark, that's super easy. If I want to write any creature from Star Wars, all I have to do is come up with a couple of things, a Rancor, I could make a Sarlacc pit, whatever. It doesn't matter. All I need is to write 2 or 3 abilities. And so there's that kind of flexibility of it attaches to whatever you want it to be. I think it could be it could be Red Dead, it could be Grand Theft Auto, it could be Skyrim, it can be vampires, whatever thing you want to do.
When you were telling me about Vampire, I had this great, I don't know why, but I had this great image of the Shadowdark art trying to do the Matrix. Yeah. And I was like, that would work as long as, when you were talking earlier, it seems like the spirit of all of these things is as long as you are clinging to hope, like as long as you are always at risk of
Yeah.
dying and you're always on that edge, you're playing that game correctly.
People want the excitement. There's a reason why people play video games up to a certain point and then they quit because it's just too easy now. There's a reason why people like to play video games on survival mode or hardcore mode where they can't save it.
5e never goes past 7th
There's
level.
a reason why people give up D&D campaigns when they get to 3rd or 5th level or whatever it is that happens. It happens. That's what people like. People like living in the dangerous place. I mean, even like I play a lot of Civilization, Civ 6. Civ 7 is a woke terror, but I'm not going to get into that. But I play a ton of Civ 6, and I'll start up a Civ 6 game, and then I'll get to a certain point where I'm like, it's not as I'm going to win this. I'm going to win this, and
yep.
I need motivation. You want to be right there in the exciting moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that for sure Shadowdark captures. It does capture that it could be the end at any moment. Make the right decision. Roll the die, roll well.
Before we wrap
Chubby,
it up, my camera just died for some friggin' reason. I have no idea what happened, but I wanted to just touch on that. There are a couple of points you made. There is someone writing and it's kickstarting, I think. It's either started or will start soon, a Weird West game using Shadowdark as a so and I do think it isn't taking anything away from Kelsey. But she has provided something that's very bare bones. I've said this before. I think when I read Shadowdark and when I play Shadowdark, it feels like old school BX, like way back in the day where there was just so much I could do with the system on my own. Not, being a kid, I did a lot with it, but you have like these building blocks. And I think with the right insight and, as you were sort of saying, bringing in things that you've been looking at, you can adapt it. So I think that is actually a strength. And I think it's smart that has such a permissive third-party license, because it's going to Shadowdark very well could be the next BX in that regard, where you're going to have all these offshoots of people doing their own thing with it. And I think that's a strength. But yeah, anyway, I just want to say that while I was fiddling with my camera. It is 2:00 in the morning. Well,
it is midnight. Our watch has 1 o'clock for you because you live on the
so our watch has ended.
But for us people in the real world.
Hey, Greg, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you giving us your time and talking with us about stuff. Is there anything you'd like to tell the audience, like specifically what they should be buying?
Well, if you go to my publisher page on DrivethRu, you can see all the stuff that I have. My most popular products are Player's Companion for Shadowdark, which is 24 ancestries and 36 classes and a ton of equipment for Shadowdark. And then the Shadow Sun, which is the Dark Sun adaptation. Both of those are platinum on DrivethRu. And then I have Shadow Rim, which is like a Skyrim in Shadowdark. I've got a GM Companion, which is on its way to becoming platinum. It's selling really, really well. It came out in March. And it's basically all of the charts in the GM portion of the Shadowdark book, either with a totally new chart for using as an alternate or expanded enormously. So like in the Shadowdark base game, there's one chart for hazards, and it has everything from avalanches to quicksand and magical outcomes and stuff like that. And I created a hazard table of the same size for every type of terrain that she has in her hex map section. So whatever you're on, if you're in a swamp or a forest or coastal or whatever it is, you can roll a different hazard table, and you're not going to roll quicksand when you're in the Arctic. You know, it's going to be based on what's there. And that, you know, that's people have been saying that they've been using that with outside of the Shadowdark ecosystem a lot.
Yeah.
And then I have a bunch of treasures also in that book. A whole new D100 table for all the different levels in Shadowdark for treasure. That's totally different treasure from what she has in hers. So it just doubles the amount of treasure you have to roll on. Then I have my own game, Ambition and Avarice 2 is up there. You can still buy the first one if you want. It's a more like do-it-yourself OSR kind of simple design, and Ambition and Avarice 2 is more got a lot more things built out rather than an implied world. I've got a couple of products for Adventure Conquer King 2. There's a setting called Warlords of Gavardia, which is set up so that you can go in at any level in Adventure Conquer King. You can go in and say, I'm going to start out as the count of this area, and it tells you how many people live there, whatever, and you can start right at Conqueror. You know, you could start out at the King level. Then I wrote a scenario design called Muliadi the Conqueror for the same setting, where it's a cut of the map. The map for Warlords of Gavardia is the biggest map I've ever made. Let me just actually pull it up real quick, if you don't mind. It's huge.
Sure, go ahead.
9,800 hex map. Let me see. All right. There, I'm sharing it now if you want to.
Yeah, that's wild looking.
Okay, so this is at the max zoom level here. But if we start going in, it goes all the way down to very tight zooms, huge map. So if you wanted to start, and I guess I can grab, it's too big, it slows down when I grab it. But like this is just one province in this huge empire. It's like the size of the Aran Empire. So
Jesus.
this is Kalapuro. It has more of a Indonesian naming system. You can see this one is Mekdela, which has more of an Ethiopian naming system. So each one of them has a different language model and all that stuff. So you can pick any of these places. You could be the count of these 3 hexes right here, you know, and that's it. You could be the guy who's the governor of this whole province, and you'd be able to do all the calculations in Adventure Conquer King for your army size and everything like that.
Have you tried selling this to the Bro SR?
I have. I don't know. I have a mixed reputation with the bros. A lot of it is I'm not as I guess high energy and like this is the best and this is the way and that kind of thing. You know, I'm more tentative of, you know, this works, try this other thing, do whatever.
That's kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
And they tend to try to convert me, and I'm like, I'm not here to be converted. I just want to know I just want to talk about what it is that you're doing in an informative way. Yeah.
They seem fairly dogmatic and evangelical.
So I've written for Axe. I've written for my own stuff. I've written for Shadowdark. The market's very clear that they want more Shadowdark.
Yeah.
I can read the sales reports and I know what people want. So that's the direction that I'm going. The way I figure is if I'm going to make a map and write out all the setting content and all that stuff, I'm going to do it in a way that speaks to the most people. for me, that's, I want people to get value out of the creative work that I do. So Shadowdark's where it's at right now. If somebody comes along with a Kickstarter in 3 months and blows us all away with this is the new greatest thing, then I'll reconsider that position. But right now, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Well, that is cool, man.
Awesome.
Thanks again for showing up and talking with us. We really appreciate it. And everybody, go to DrivethruRPG. All you got to do is, type in Chubby Funster and all his stuff pops up. There's a lot there.
Hey, man, Greg, Chubby, you're the best. I really like having you in chat. Thank you so much for being around. And I know every time I almost feel cool on my own show or on X, you will be right there to remind me that I am only so cool. And I appreciate it, man. I shaved just for you. I want you to know I shaved to make sure everything.
I tried to hold out, man, but I couldn't make it. It just got so itchy, and I had to shave it off.
I know it's hard. Well, I'm telling you, that's why I switched from the beard to the stash. I used to do the whole thing, back when I was out on the road. I get all scraggly because, believe it or not, I think there are some girls who really like scraggly ass men. They think they can fix. But now the stash, it's very cool.
Let me say this: when I was between marriages, I watched a lot of videos of guys who would probably be considered pickup artists in a broad sense. But there was this one talk by this guy that really stuck with me, where he said, you have to realize that women don't think like you at all. And he goes, and here's the example. So let's say you're kissing a woman and you can feel some of her facial hair touch you. What is your reaction to that going to be? It's going to be like disgust, right? And he's like, but there are women who enjoy that sensation. He's like, that's how different you are from them.
There you
go. Don't use your frame of mind to think about what the woman wants. Like she is not thinking the same way as you.
My attitude, I've always been very lucky. I'm doing great, and but my attitude has always been just don't fuck anything up. Don't fuck anything up. Just be quiet. Be quiet. Well, listen, hey, Chubby, thank you, man. I appreciate everything. You just being here is awesome. Thank you to chat.
Yeah, great chat tonight. I wish I could have commented more.
Yeah, please hit like and subscribe, the bell icon, hit follow on Rumble, and we'll see you guys next week. It looks like I'm buying a new camera. Sweet. All
right, brand new, man.
Our watch has ended.